Hey guys, welcome back. So today, working on this 2000 watt Honeywell inverter generator. This one was given to the channel by Stanley, who is a local subscriber, and he picked this one up from a local Fish and Game. I believe it's in non-running condition, but I really don't know the history on this machine. The only thing I know is that Stanley said there was bad fuel in the tank, so he did drain it out. And thankfully the tank looks to be in pretty good condition, but I can still smell the old gas coming out of there. So yeah, most likely it's a carb issue, at least that's my hope, because most of the parts on this are not available, including the inverter module. So I say we do the easy thing. Let's check the oil, put a little bit of gas in it, and pull it over, see if it shows any signs of life. Choke was left on, so that is not a good sign. It tells me someone was trying to start it and most likely failed. And it's good to see the carburetors right up front here, so this can be serviced without taking the whole clamshell off. I'm not sure if this fuel line's factory. It's kind of in the way to check the oil, but that does run over to a fuel pump, which makes sense because the tank goes down pretty far on this side to about here. So you do need the pump to pump that fuel up into that carburetor. Dipstick might be broken, and yeah, there's not a lot of oil in there. Can't even see any. Let me get you closer. Okay, there is some oil in there. It looks pretty used, and it's definitely low. So potentially, we just need to add oil, and this thing will run. So I'm going to top that off. Yeah, I took this whole bottle. It's about 200 milliliters of oil, which doesn't sound like a lot, but these engines, they don't take much oil to begin with. All right, let's give this a try. Got the choke on, the fuel valves on. Assuming the carburetor's empty, it's going to take about 10 pulls to prime the pump and fill the bowl. So let's give it a try. Nothing. So I'm going to give it a little bit of starting fluid, see if that makes a difference. Nice. All right, good. We've got spark, compression, timing. Fuel is the issue here. So I'm going to try it one more time with starting fluid, this time with the light plugged in, and hopefully we see it turn on for a second. Had me worried for a second there. The light took what seemed like a long time to turn on, but in reality it was a few seconds, and that is typical with inverters. The engine speed needs to stabilize and run for a few seconds before things switch on. But the light came on the engine actually was running on the carburetor. The carburetor took over, but only with the choke on. Once I turned the choke off, the engine stalled. So yeah, this one, at least the carb is showing signs of life, but it does need to be cleaned. Gonna start just by getting some of these lines off. This one is the breather line, I believe, that goes up to the airbox. And then we have a line right here off the intake manifold. That is where the fuel pump gets its pulse. So let's get that off. It's kind of loose on there. I'm sure that's not helping it run. So we might replace that line. That's on there pretty tight. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. Most likely I'll just remove it from the carb body once we get this out. A couple other things worthy of note. Under this cap, most likely there is an adjustment for the pilot circuit. And the drain for the bowl usually should be facing out, so you can access it easily to drain the old fuel out. And in this case, it's turned in such a way that makes me think potentially someone has had this off before and they put the bowl on, maybe not in the way it should be. Anyway, to get this off, usually I take the airbox off and then slide the carb off the studs, but that's not going to work with this case installed. So for this one, I'm going to remove these two bolts, which hold this intake manifold right to the engine, and this whole thing should come out as one assembly. And once we get it out a bit, I have to disconnect the servo and remove the fuel line. I think we'll be free. All right, that one's gone. Yeah, it looks like I was wrong. This was not the breather. I'm not sure what that is offhand, but there's another line up here, which definitely is. Sometimes these servos have a quick disconnect. This one, I don't think that's the case. You actually have to unplug it from the inverter board or just uninstall it like this. And it's something I want to get off anyway, so I plan on running the carburetor through the ultrasonic, and the servo cannot stay on for that. Actually, you know what? I don't want to pull it out there. I want to remove those screws, because if I pull this out, there is a spring that's going to come out of place. And it can be put back, but there's no need to remove it this way. And actually, this plastic plate, it is blocking the pilot jet. So we'll just get the whole thing out instead. Is there another breather? What the heck? There's 3 different tubes going into this airbox. It's kind of odd. And that's the spring I was talking about right there. And this white plastic piece just lifts right out, and that spring will launch across the garage, in my case, never to be found. So I think I'm gonna take this off now so I don't lose it. I was wrong about the lines going into the airbox. Actually, only 2 were going into the airbox. I disconnected this one from right there, and it looks like that line goes up to the fuel tank. So most likely this is evap, a charcoal canister of sorts, and then this line goes over to the airbox as well as the crankcase pressure. And then we have this other line, which was getting the vacuum off the intake manifold for the pump. And then we have the fuel line right there. So not too bad. Unfortunately, the gasket got completely destroyed when I took this apart. I was hoping to save it, but I think that is going to have to be remade. There, we'll start with the bowl. Let's see what's in here. No water. Definitely looks pretty old. Not bad, actually. Needle looks to be good. Main jet's down the center. We'll get that out in a minute, as well as the pilot jet. I think for now I want to get this airbox off. I have to remove all these little screws going around, and that should give me access to the bolts that are holding this carb in place. I'm going to leave this on. There's nothing holding it on now other than the gasket. So, yeah, there's no need to rip it. If it's going to stay there, it shouldn't hurt anything. I'll start by getting the idle set screw out. And underneath that is the pilot jet, which I suspect is clogged since I was not able to start it. It's hard to tell. Main jet, it's not clogged. The pilot jet, I think that is clogged. And there's the needle. I did screw it in until it's seated before removing it, and it was surprisingly far out. It was almost 3 turns. So yeah, that seems a little bit excessive. I think when I put it back, I'll put it closer to 2, and we can always adjust it as needed. Pilot jet was not clogged, and neither was the main. So I'm kind of surprised that this didn't run on its own. I mean, I guess it did run, but it didn't stay running. So I probably should have given it a bit more of a chance, because I'm not seeing any reason why this shouldn't have run other than the fuel that was in there. But yeah, I don't even think this needs to go through the ultrasonic, really. The only thing that's even a little dirty, I would say, is the bowl. Anyway, we've got it apart. We'll wash it anyway and get it back together. So now it has no excuse for not running. So let's get this back together. We'll get the emulsion tube and the main jet in first. Make sure that pilot jet seats all the way down, like that. And then the idle set screw. Not too important in this application. This generator, the throttle is computer controlled. You don't actually want to influence the speed with this set screw, but it does also serve to hold the pilot jet in place. And only drive it in until you get a couple threads to come through. Like that. And then we're missing this needle right here. And this actually meters how much fuel goes in through this little pilot circuit. It's actually in front of the throttle plate, so it's always providing fuel to the engine at high speed or low speed. So I'm going to crank this in till it's lightly seated. And I'll bring it out 2 turns. And we'll adjust that later if needed, but that's it. I mean, this carb is together, and I guess I'll put the airbox back on. And before reinstalling it, I do need to make a gasket, and I found one that is the right size, but it's very, very thin, and I don't think that's going to make a very good seal, especially when the surface isn't perfect. So I'm going to take a second and just cut up one with some gasket paper that's a lot thicker. That should make a better seal. I'm going to start just by transferring the image, and then we'll just cut it out. I'm going to use a hole punch for the sides, and then the middle, I actually have a punch set. I think it is meant for working with leather, but it works really well on gasket material. And if you don't have gasket material, I mean, a cereal box actually will work pretty well, and it's thicker than this gasket here that I don't want to use, and will do a decent job. The outer part of the gasket does not need to be perfect. If it's irregular shaped, it should not affect anything. Yeah, I think that's good. It's a little off center, but it's not encroaching either on the intake because this hole was cut a little bit oversized. Let's see if it's any better this way. Yeah. All right, fuel line is connected. And earlier I did say it took about 10 pulls to get the pump to fill the bowl before this thing will start, but that's not necessarily true. If you fill the tank high enough so that it's above the carburetor, it should gravity feed and fill the bowl, making it easier to start. Looks like there's a date on the engine, 2002. So yeah, this, back in the day, was an expensive generator. There weren't Too many inverter generators at that time. All right, let's give it a try. Place your bets. How many pulls? I say 9. All right, fuel's on, choke's on. And run is on. Uh-oh. Try it with the choke open. Okay, I'm gonna give it a little help. It was really hard to start, and without starting fluid, I'm not sure it would have started. So I'm going to try to restart it now while the engine's hot, and I know the bowl is full, and see if it'll restart. We'll try it like this with the choke off. The engine's hot. Try turning the choke on. Let's try it again, maybe half choke. Nope. Full choke. Definitely not a first pull machine, but it is starting now consistently in 2 or 3 pulls. And once it's running, it runs very well. It has no issues handling a 1500 watt load. The Hertz and the voltage are rock solid, and it idles down and runs just fine without surging. So I don't think it's a carburetor issue. You know, potentially it could be the plug, maybe the valves, but I'm leaning more towards the compression release. These early model inverters, some of them were overly aggressive and let a little too much compression out, making it easy to pull over, but harder to start. Anyway, I think I'm going to get the oil changed while it's hot. The oil looked pretty dirty, and then I'll clean up the outside a bit. And once the engine is cool, I'll try to restart it again. If you've ever changed the oil on an inverter, you know it's a really messy process getting the oil out. So a little transfer pump like this is a very good idea for inverter generators. It doesn't quite get everything out, but otherwise, if you just dump it out, you end up with half the oil inside and it just ends up leaking everywhere. It's the next morning and it's pretty cold, so let's try starting it. Choke's on, fuel's on, and engine is on. And that would be a no. No signs of life. So despite what I said earlier, I think it could be fuel related because I know starting fluid definitely starts it up. But yeah, let's pull the spark plug, see what that looks like. That could be the problem. It's a torch. This is the closest plug I could come up with. It's an NGK CR5 HSB. It's a cooler plug, but it has the same threads. It's the same length. But I think the thing stopping me from trying it is the connection. They are different. This is not removable. So I think I need to order the correct plug, but I'm not convinced that's going to do anything. So the other thing I noticed is that the gap here is too small. If I take this feeler gauge, 25 thousandths, it does not fit. Let's try 19 thousandths. Does not fit. $16 fits. So that gap should be closer to 30 thousandths. And with it so close, it's not going to build the proper voltage and have a good spark. So I'm just going to bring that back up to where it should be and maybe clean this up, put it back in the machine. Spark plugs reinstalled. Let's try it again. Well, that was an easy fix. The plug, I kind of jumped to conclusions. I saw the name torch, and I know those plugs can be problematic, but even a good plug gapped improperly is going to cause issues. And in this case, it was just gapped incorrectly. And now it started second pull. So that is a pretty big improvement. Anyway, I'm going to wait for the new plug because the one that's in there, it is 20 years old. So the name brand plug will be here tomorrow. I'll get that installed and just do one more test with the oscilloscope and just take a look at the quality of the output on this generator. It's amazing. I ordered this plug this morning from Amazon at about 9, and now it's 6 p.m. and it's already been delivered to my door. So yeah, let's just double check the gap. And it's right at 30 thousandths. So I'm going to throw this in, try to start it again. Got the torch plug out and the NGK plug installed. So let's try starting it again. Hopefully it starts in at least 2 pulls, but I'll take starting. Let's try it again. Okay, good. It starts right up. So I'd say we're out of the woods on this one. One last test I want to do is just start it up with the oscilloscope connected and take a look at that waveform. Uh-oh. It looked pretty good. Not perfect. Without a load, you could see a little distortion in the sine wave. And then once under load, actually it smoothed out really well. So yeah, it's a pretty good machine. I mean, considering it's 20 years old and it's doing really as well as it is saying something. I mean, this technically is a clone. It was modeled after the Honda EU 2000. I see some similarities in there, but there are a lot of differences as well. I've taken apart an EU 2000, and I actually took apart an SF 3000 made by Fugi-Micro, which is the company that makes this generator. It's just a rebranded Fugi-Micro, and the construction of the engine is impressive because the Honda, for example, has a plastic cam and a timing belt. This one has a metal cam and a timing chain, and it actually has a removable jug. It's built a lot like an engine you'd see on a dirt bike or an ATV. So definitely no corners cut on this one. I think it's doing pretty good. And surprisingly, really didn't have anything wrong with it. I mean, the carburetor looked good, and in this case, it was just a plug issue. So if I had to guess, I would say it was shutting down because it was low on oil. It only had about half the oil that was required. And someone clearly had gone through the machine because the bowl on the carburetor wasn't quite installed right, and the spark plug gap was wrong. And that torch plug, I'm not sure if that's original to the machine. I took a look at the manual. I didn't see any mention of a torch plug as an option. And with that gap, if that was the original plug, this machine would have been very hard to start for the first 20 years of its life. But the plug didn't look like it had been used much. So I think someone put that in while trying to fix the problem and just made it worse. Anyway, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.